So a lot of parents live day to day with some sort of aches, pains or niggles. It's really common when you're carrying around a baby all day or a toddler to suffer from back pain, hip pain, neck pain. And this is something that I really experienced during the early days of parenthood, something that our wife suffered from as well. So constantly carrying our son around, contact naps as well. So if you have to sleep with the baby on you, can cause you to just feel stiff a lot of the time. And it just makes those sort of daily parenting tasks quite difficult. So there's a lot of content out there on YouTube or on social media that might advise you on how to reduce day-to-day pain or stiffness, but for me a lot of it isn't really focused on parents and really specific to the issues that we experience. So during this video I just want to give you a few tips that really helped me and my wife get out of that day-to-day pain, that day-to-day aching, and hopefully it'll help you out as well. Before I go into how you can do this, one thing that we have to acknowledge is the fact that living pain-free, if you've lived any sort of life, if you've played sport, if you've had any sort of injury, living pain-free is sort of a bit of a myth really. Life is pretty chaotic, our bodies are very complex and they respond to certain situations in unexpected ways. How often do you wake up and suddenly you can't turn your head one way because your neck's gone stiff? It's unpredictable, and the idea that we can just be permanently pain-free is a bit of a myth that gets sold on social media. But what we can do is we can massively reduce the amount of aches and pains we get on a daily basis, and we can learn to manage it better. The truth is most sort of minor acute pain, like lower back pain for example, is shown to go away by itself. But what we can do is just do a few things to help speed that up and then to help strengthen on top of that. So many parents will default to stretching in order to try and reduce the amount of stiffness and pain, and it will do that, but it will only be temporary. If you think about it, how many times have you, let's take the hip flexors for example, stretched out your hip flexors and then the next time you've gone for a walk or a run, or you've even woken up the next day and they're tight again? That's because with stretching, we only get a temporary relief. It's not a permanent change. And what you then find is you've got to do it more often and you've got to keep on doing it every day, multiple times per day in order to keep chasing that relief. So we obviously need a more long-term solution, something that we can do either a few times a week within our training that's going to help reduce this. So the first thing is layering something on top of that basic stretching that you're doing, and this is a little bit more advanced mobility work. Now you don't have to do this at home every day. It can be just something that you do pre-gym session, or you try and do 2 or 3 times a week. So I'm not talking just basic leg swings and arm circles here. I'm talking progressive mobility that we can do to allow joints to move through their whole range of motion. Think about this term, motion is lotion. The more that we move a joint, the more we expose it to its full range, the better it will feel, and the more that will be normal for that joint. And this is nice and easy to do because we can just tie it in with our gym work as part of the warm-up. So a few examples of what I like to do pre-lift. I like to do a lot of mobility for my back and my spine. I'm sure you've experienced this if you're a parent carrying around a little one, you get very stiff in your back. So putting in exercises like crucifix, any thoracic spine work, so T-spine rotations, these sort of things are really going to help here. And then also I like to focus on my hips, so opening up my hips, might be something like hip aeroplanes. These are all going to be great exercises that you can do. What it's also going to do is allow us to lift through a better range of movement during our gym session, which brings us on nicely to point number 2, which is strengthen through length. And for this one, I'm going to give you a really common example. So when people get tight hip flexors, they think the solution is to stretch those hip flexors out as much as they can. However, like I said before, this tightness then just suddenly returns later on. That's often because that muscle is usually weak as opposed to being tight. A muscle that is weak will go tight because it's trying to get tension in order to meet the day-to-day demands that we're placing on it. So we need to address that weakness head on as opposed to just trying to stretch the problem away. Now, during early parenthood, my hip flexors went super tight. I don't know whether it was just from sitting down a lot holding the baby or just getting overworked from walking around so much while holding him because we had to rock him a lot to get him to sleep. So I had to address this within my gym program. And one of the best exercises I did for this was just a simple standing knee lift, using a cable machine with a cuff around my ankle, applying load to my hip flexor through its full range of movement. If you don't have access to a cable machine, that's fine. You can just use a kettlebell and do either a standing variation like this or lie down on a bench, and you'll be pretty quickly humbled by this exercise. You'll actually realise how weak your hip flexors are if you've had this type of issue before, because the weight you lift will not be much. So give it a try, and this is a great example for the hip flex, and that goes across the board. Applying load through larger ranges of movement is going to be something that really helps our mobility, and it's going to help reduce that day-to-day stiffness. And number 3, and this is going to sound a little bit obvious, but actually lift. Don't start deprioritizing training because you're feeling stiff and aching. Sometimes a good lifting session where you go through a good range of movements is better for reducing that stiffness than just resting and not doing anything. So don't just think because, oh, my back's a little bit achy, so I'm not going to lift today. Don't get into that habit. One of the big things that helped my back was actually starting to deadlift again. So I was suffering with mid-lower back pain, and as soon as I added deadlifts into the program, that pain went away. Obviously, there are different causes for back pain. It's quite a complex subject. So if you have got pain that you just know is something else, and actually lifting is going to exacerbate it, get checked out by a medical professional. I'm not advising you hurt yourself. But if you've just got a bit of aching and a bit of stiffness, sometimes a good lift could actually be what you need. This is also going to help build strength around our joints, and that is going to help us meet the day-to-day demands of parenthood. And within this program, don't neglect core training. I'm not talking just like static holds like planks. They're great if your core is already weak, but for a strong core, that's not going to do a huge amount. But add in some more advanced core exercises and add in some rotation work. So this is a big thing that people don't seem to do in their programs anymore, but actually rotate. Get your spine moving, get it loaded through that movement. The core is a 360-degree muscle group. It works through a lot of different planes of movement, and there's a lot of muscle groups involved. So adding in some rotation is really important in your program. Remember, like I said, if you are experiencing sort of more chronic pain, then it's worth getting checked out by a medical professional before you go ahead with any of this stuff. But honestly, movement is one of the best things for reducing aches and pains for parents. This is something I really prioritise with my clients on the Athletic Parent Project and within my coaching business. So if that's something you need help with, then please check out the link below. Give me a shout if you've got any questions, and we can go from there.